Welcome to the Reddit Chronicles. Today we will be reading from Confession. Our first post is by Automatic Speakers. My mom took $50 from me, so I lied and told her I didn't know where her $200 went. Me and my mother have an up and down relationship. Sometimes we'll be best friends, the next she'll wish I was never born, a burden to her. It was my payday. As soon as I got home, she demanded $50 from me. I had just given her $150 2 days prior. I knew what it was for. She wanted to gamble, or she was giving it to my stepdad so he could gamble. No matter how many times I told her no, she would get louder and louder and threaten me more. So I just gave in. She wasn't gonna pay me back, she never does, but what could I do? A few days later, me and her were talking in her room. When she got up to leave, I saw it. $200 dropping from her wallet. When I saw it, I didn't know what got a hold of me. This felt like my way of getting revenge, being able to pay myself back kinda. I quickly pocketed the money and went on my way. A few hours later, my mom called in a frantic asking if I'd seen $200 around the house. I told her no straight to her face and hung up. To this day, she still doesn't know. I hated stealing and lying to my mother's face, but I also still feel it was deserved after years of her taking from me. I've been living with this guilt for about a month now, and it eats me alive every day and keeps me awake at night. I'm sorry, Mom. In the comments, Powerlifter Diarrhea writes, he feels guilty because he has the emotional maturity that she doesn't possess. It's going to still generate negative emotions for OP, even if it's taking back what is owed to him, because he knows her missing that money will cause her emotional and possibly financial hardship. Whether she deserves it or not is irrelevant. Someone who is emotionally mature will still feel guilt over this. Our next post is by Stead. I snooped on the CEO's email account and got myself unfired. A couple years out of college, I worked as an analyst at a pretty small private equity firm. The CEO was one of the biggest assholes I've ever met. He was fairly young, in his 40s, a multimillionaire, and the type of guy driven solely by money with zero business ethics. He'd do anything to get the upper hand in a deal, regardless of who it screws over. Contractors, employees. I even saw him seriously F over a longtime family friend of his without any remorse. Anyway, aside from my analyst role, as it was a really small business, only about 20 people in the office, and then a bunch of people working remote, I also happened to be one of the only semi-technology literate people in the company. So like many of my generation, I became the de facto millennial office computer guy too. Despite my lack of qualifications, I got put in charge of handling pretty much anything minor tech related. Setting up servers, fixing laptop issues, answering how do I convert this to PDF questions, even basic network security. They thought I was some sort of computer genius, but really I was just mostly winging it, Googling pretty much everything. But eventually, I got legitimately pretty good at all the tech stuff. They gave me bigger tasks like planning all of the computer systems for their owned businesses and supervising installs. I didn't get paid extra for any of this, mind you. After a couple years of serious BS working there, I was pretty worn out. I wasn't progressing. I hated working for Captain Douchebag. He treated everyone like crap. I was pulling 12 to 14 plus hour days with no overtime or performance bonus, and they weren't paying me nearly what they should have. I also hated being the tech guy and was depressed as heck, decently living in a cubicle. So I decided I full-on had enough of the 9-to-8 life working for jerks, and I would start my own consulting business working for myself. However, instead of quitting right away, I figured it would be smart to first build up my client base on the side while I was still getting a steady paycheck. So that's what I did. I launched my company and landed my first clients. As the workload increased, I slowly started spending more and more time working on my side business while at my office job. At first, I was pretty low-key about it, but eventually it was blatant, as it was a super small company. I was the only one who knew how to do a lot of important tasks and operate some key internal systems. It was easy for me to tell my boss a project was taking a whole week to complete, that I actually finished in 10 minutes. Pretty soon, I was spending 80% of my day working on my own stuff in the office. I'd even take calls for my side business clients at my desk. The rest of the time, I was usually playing around on Reddit or something. Of course, we had systems in place to monitor network activity, but I was the person in charge of monitoring it. This continued for a while. As my own business ramped up, I cared less and less about the office job. And since I hated waking up early, I began rolling into work late. At first it was only 30 minutes or so, then it progressed to an hour. When my boss didn't reprimand me, it became clear how much they needed me there. I took full advantage of this. Before long, I was arriving around noon, working for a couple hours, then heading home. My coworkers weren't happy, but I helped them with all of their tech problems, and they hated the company too, so they kept their mouths shut about it. My boss eventually said something to me about it at one point, but I just came in on time the next few days and then went back to coming in whenever I wanted. After more than 2 months of coming in 4 to 5 hours late and working on my side business in full view of my jerk boss, I couldn't believe I wasn't fired yet. I deserved it and felt it was inevitable. On a hunch, I decided to do a little investigative work. As I was the tech guy, I also had full access to the company email server. So I logged into the CEO's personal email account and searched for my name. Lo and behold, there was a recent email thread between him, my direct boss, and some other team members with my name in the subject line. Obviously, I open it. They're discussing my recent performance issues. The last email in the chain basically said, if nobody has any objections, I will be terminating him at the end of the week. 2 days from then. I wasn't surprised, but I decided there was no way I was going to let these jerks fire me. Although I didn't give a crap about that job, I didn't want to have a termination in my work history. I also wanted to keep getting paid for a while longer. Of course, I couldn't let him know I actually knew I was getting canned. So, I formulated a plan to perform a little Inception reverse psychology mind F on the CEO. The next day, one day before they planned to fire me, I requested a meeting with him to discuss my current performance. In that meeting, I sat down and he asked me what I wanted to talk about. So I told him, paraphrased, "Look, I know I've been a crappy employee lately. I'm sure you've noticed. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been kind of getting the feeling you guys are planning to let me go soon." When I said that, the shocked look on his face was priceless. He must have thought I was psychic to work that out on my own the day before it was going to happen. I remember him just saying something like, I continued, while he sat flabbergasted. "So I'll be honest with you, my heart isn't in this job anymore. As you know, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, which I'm sure you can relate to. I want to start my own company. However, as you're aware, I have a lot of responsibilities here nobody else can do." I then proceeded to list all of the things I did and projects I was working on. I could see it on his face when the realization sunk in of how screwed he'd be if I left suddenly. "So here's what I propose. You don't fire me. I don't quit. I keep working here for a month, finish my current projects, and train whoever you want on everything I'm in charge of. After a month is up, I will continue to come in once per week until it's complete. After that, if you still need me, you can pay me on an hourly project-by-project basis." I intentionally mentioned the possibility of me quitting so he could feel like he won the negotiation. Even though I technically had him by the balls, he paused to think for a minute, then said something along the lines of, "Okay, you have a deal." So not only did I get myself unfired, I actually turned the company into a paying client. During that month, I continued doing pretty much whatever I wanted since I had an expiration date, while training my replacement as promised. After the month was up, they hit me up regularly for remote task work. I charged them triple what I was earning while working there and barely had to deal with the CEO. My client base was big enough I dropped them for good. After all that, the CEO still calls me up for advice questions nearly 3 years later. These days I just blow him off saying, "Sorry, I'm too busy." Our next post is by Reputation Flaky. I lied about getting a degree, and now I'm too deep in. F27, this is something I never told my friend, family, or boyfriend. I never verbalized this or even wrote it down before, but it's killing me inside. I live in a European country. A normal bachelor's degree takes 6 semesters, 3 years. It's free. Besides administration fees, you pay quarterly. And I haven't paid the fees for the next semester, and I'm about to get kicked out. Let me start at the beginning. When it came to getting into a course, I didn't get into anything I wanted because my grades were that terrible. It's actually a secret in itself because everyone assumed my grades were top because I don't belong to the dumb kind, I guess. I was always a child prodigy. Got into school 2 years earlier than normal and skipped a class. But by the time I became a teenager, I was deeply depressed and had a lot of social anxiety, to the point that simple interactions were too much to handle for me. I would never go to school, and it reflected in my grades. They weren't bad, but they also ain't that good either. I actually had to redo my final year. My teenage self didn't have many options, so she picked the most random subject that didn't require numerous classes and ended up in experimental physics. I would have walked out the first day if I didn't meet some of my school friends. We became study buddies, and everything went fine until my depressions kicked in. I got put into a psychiatric ward for half a year, and once I got back they moved on, and I didn't pass one exam. It had been over 6 years ago, and I never bounced back. I start feeling big imposter syndrome and start telling myself that I'm not smart enough to do that. The fact that we were only 4 girls at the beginning and the others had already dipped out didn't help my case, because it left me isolated and with some weird kind of pride that I needed to make it in this man-dominated field. Sexism within nerd groups exists. It's a real thing. They mocked me and told me I should go back to do something with kids, like normal women do. I was quite female presenting, with mini skirts and nails, and they had a lot to say about that. I got even more depressed, what made it impossible for me to get out the bed. But then the pandemic hit. I know it's inappropriate to say that, but it was a blessing in disguise. I didn't have to leave my bed to go to university and study. Furthermore, I could do right that and be all right, but my imposter syndrome kicked in again. I have zero confidence in myself. When the exam season came around, I had so much anxiety that I never went or wrote one. It's not that I don't get it. I'm simply too scared to fail and prove everyone right. At this point, I didn't want to study anymore, but everyone around me was so proud and told everyone that I'm gonna be in physics. I'm a Daisy, and it's quite important in our culture to not embarrass your family and to not be a bad example for everyone who comes after you. Academics were really important in our house, and saving your face too. I didn't want to make people talk and call me stupid. It's enough if I do it all the time, and my classmates too. But everyone starts to notice and asking me why I'm still on my bachelor's degree. So I started to lie that I'm in my master's, what put me into way more complicated situations. I'm not stupid, I know that. I became so depressed that life doesn't function anymore. And if anyone is wondering why I don't get help, I do. I have weekly therapy sessions for years, but every time I climb out of the darkness, something hits me and I fall back. I'm actually quite endangered because of everything, you know what I mean. I started to have the mentality that I rather drop dead than explain anything to anyone. Not only that, but I'm too deep into this lie. I can't back out and tell people the truth. I wouldn't go to my courses because I was embarrassed that I'm still sitting in all of them with these 17-year-old. And having the professors looking at me in disgust is something that I can't handle in general. They didn't like me in the first place because I'm an immigrant, didn't do my best, wasn't smart enough to understand mathematics like that, and what I felt the most, because I'm a woman, and in a field that is not conventionally picked by women. Since I was a child, I always wanted to end up in science or ingenuity. I wanted to inspire little girls to follow their interests like I had at the beginning. It's probably quite Barbie. But I always wanted to tell the girls that everything is possible and that you shouldn't be limited by gender expectation that had been put on you. I always lived my life like that, from climbing up the trees with the boys to playing American football all my teenage years. It's not that I thought that I'm something special or not like the other girls. Because I developed at a very young age my understanding of feminism. It has evolved since then. But I could have never accepted to be defeated by a guy's field. And on a different note, by myself. Anyways, my confession is that I never got 1 credit point in my 6 years of being in university. In the comments, Moonpa C writes, I'm 34 and I just finished my master's degree because of the same reasons as you. I started university at 22, then got diagnosed with bipolar disorder and ADHD and wasted years and years on trying and failing my courses. Then, 5 years ago, I finally put myself back together and started all over. The social pressure is hard and the shame is real, but you should do this for yourself, not them. It will benefit you much more in the long run. OP, it's important to remember that you're not alone in facing challenges like depression and imposter syndrome. It's never too late to make changes in your life, whether that means pursuing your original academic goals or finding a new path that aligns with your interests and passions. Remember, your mental health and well-being should be a priority.